Today we're going to get in the latest Tesla news. We have Nissan getting introduced to all 18,000 Tesla Superchargers here in Q4. Uber's CEO says it's not easy to compete with Elon Musk, and Q3 of 2024 EV sales are out, and no surprise, Tesla Model Y is on the top of the list. Let's get into it. First, let's get into the Q3 EV sales here in the United States. No surprise, the top of the list is the Model Y with 86,000 deliveries. That comes no surprise to anyone who follows the EV space. The Model Y is the most refined EV and the most popular in the world. Second up, you have the Model 3 who has 58,000-ish deliveries. That comes in at second place. I think the refresh really helps that, and I'm actually surprised it didn't have a chance of being closer to the Model Y. The Model Y is waiting for the Juniper refresh, and I feel like that would make me hesitant as a buyer to buy one brand new right now, knowing that the Juniper is going to be coming early of next year, potentially. The Cybertruck also came in with 16,000, almost 17,000 deliveries, ahead of the Mach-E, ahead of the Ioniq, ahead of all the Chevys, and ahead of the Rivians. That is surprising me because the Cybertruck was just released last year when we were at the Cybertruck event in November. So in less than 10 months now, the Cybertruck is already at a cemented place at third place, the most EVs sold here in the United States. Down the list, you're seeing cars that are performing as expected. I would say the more expensive cars like the BMW iX have about 4,000 cars sold. EV9, larger SUV, about 6,000. The Rivian R1S has about 7,000 cars sold. The Rivian R1S for me is the best non-Tesla EV on the market. Provides the best range, provides the best comfort. And if money is not an object for you, or it's less of a variant in terms of car purchasing, Rivian R1S is probably what I'd lean towards for a family car. It's been about 1 year since the Cybertruck has been released, and they're starting to start with price cuts. That means the Foundation series will be eliminated as far as we can tell on our side. And I think the big next surge in sales will be when they actually qualify for the $7,500 tax credit. That means Tesla's gonna be dropping the price probably about $79,990. I look forward to that actually happening because two things, that puts me probably in the buyer range of figuring out if that's actually a truck that's gonna be good for us. As you know, we have two of them already that we rent here at EV Access at our office, and they perform great for short-term and long-term rentals. But we did pay the Foundation series price, and it was good to have it early on, but now the pricing of rentals really reflects on the price of the car. So as the price comes down, it's gonna be harder and harder to get our money's worth on those older ones, but these newer ones will have to re-inventory. Next on the docket, Uber CEO came out and said, competing with Elon Musk is not easy, and he would love to get Tesla's Robo-Taxis on the Uber platform when it's ready to roll out. Obviously, when you're in Uber, you're in a very, very tough position right now with Elon Musk coming out and saying, hey, we're actually gonna replace your whole model, and we're gonna use these management companies to help manage our robo-taxis and eliminate the need for a driver. The interesting point here is that Uber is very reliant on two things right now. One, it doesn't own any assets, right? So it's gonna be very, very difficult for them to pivot without ownership of the asset. And two, the driver situation. There's a W-2 1099 contract issues. If these drivers do get declared that they should be W-2, Uber's gonna be a really, really tough spot. And I don't think Elon has any reason to play ball with somebody who is going to be remodeling themselves in terms of a network, in terms of a company-wide situation. If these cars do come out and Uber's still reliant on, W-2 drivers potentially, right? And they still don't own any cars, and the cost of mobility is going to go down significantly without having to pay the labor force, right? So I think Elon has a really interesting situation. Does he build out his own process and organization from the ground up in terms of the transportation needs, or do they partner with someone like Uber or a potentially smaller company? I think it will be the latter. I don't think Elon's going to be looking for a partner in a major corporation right now that's similar to potentially Twitter, is potentially overstaffed, has been overbuilt out, and you can maybe build it from scratch much more efficiently if you have Elon behind the scenes. So I think that's a very interesting public play by Uber CEO. I think it's the right move, but I'm curious if that moves the needle with Elon wanting to work with Uber or not in the future. Uber CEO did say it's up to what Tesla does, but Uber does already have a lot of EVs on its platform, which he said drivers love. And I think that comment is just missing the mark. It's not about the EVs, it's about the autonomous ability. I think the Waymo partnership's a step in the right direction, but as most people know, Waymos aren't actually fully autonomous. They're assisted in the back end. So I think what will end up happening most likely will be the Uber-Waymo partnership versus the Elon Musk Robo-Taxi servicing, and I would not bet against Elon. And the next news, we have Nissan announces that we'll have access to 18,000 superchargers at the start of Q4. This is interesting news. Nissan's one of the later companies to actually adopt the Tesla network, and I think companies are still working on building out. I believe our Chevys just got access to it, and Tesla's just really now building out stations that have the Magic Dock plugin. If you don't know what the Magic Dock plugin is, that is the additional called adapter or attachment that the Tesla chargers can have now. When you pull it out, you're deciding if you're NACS or CCS. So that will be a really exciting time, I think, for especially new automakers, whether it's Rivian or Lucid. Like, it makes the most sense because this is the biggest stress of a new EV owner is they don't understand how the infrastructure works. They don't understand that you actually really aren't that reliant on superchargers. You mostly charge at home, but it helps ease the consumer, right? And that's the key part. So the adoption will happen fast faster when the consumer is at ease, and this will help with that. The larger automakers, I think it's unique that they are slower to adapt to this NACS. It's like they wanted to have it their way. The issue is that the CCS adapting network, whether it's Electrify America, ChargePoint, whatever it may be, just isn't to where Tesla is. And if you are Ford creating your own Ford network, they were trying, or if you're Nissan to build out the own infrastructure, you are 10 years behind your competition right now. So for you to actually be a player in the EV game, I think you really do need to adopt to the NACS charger, be software compatible with Teslas, make these cars communicate quicker, so it's just plug and play instead of having to start chargers. And that will be a net benefit regardless if you're not making the money off the chargers, you will increase your sales as long as your cars are comparative to any other car in the market. This will be an interesting play here in the near future too, because Nissan has, I believe it's called the Aria, which in my opinion has been a dud in the EV sales. They have a new line, hopefully, of EVs coming out here in the near future, but they definitely need to up their game and their quality of EVs they're providing, and then worry about the charging network. So that will be a big first step for them. In other non-United States-based news, the EU is sticking to its plan to ban the sale of petrol-driven cars starting in 2035. I do not think that is the right decision. Whether I think EV is a huge component of the future, I do not think that the government should be stepping in and deciding what the consumers can consume, regardless of what they think their truth is for what's the best decision for their citizens, right? So I think making benchmarks of efficiency for cars is a more effective way, making it much harder for gas cars to compete with those efficiencies relative to EVs. That's a great way to push the market in the right direction. But just coming out and saying, hey, all petrol-driven cars will not be accessible here in Europe in 2035 just seems asinine, especially when the European automakers, ironically, are doing the worst at selling EVs. So you're putting your own companies in your own backyard in the toughest position. BMW, Mercedes, Audi, who I believe is selling their plant in Europe because they're having issues producing and selling EVs at scale. Those companies, like, what are they supposed to do if their bread and butter is gas cars, right? Or even hybrids, and they still even aren't there in that level. So that would be a really interesting take. That means we have about 10 years left of these gas-driven cars in Europe. And does that enough time for Mercedes catch up? Will that force one of those companies to go upside down or have to merge with another company as they compete with making losses on EV sales to try to convert into a full EV company? I believe Ford is losing some $80,000 to $100,000 per EV produced, and that's in line with converting to be an EV-centric company. We'll get more efficient as time goes, but the forcing factor might make it happen too fast, right? I know Rivian's getting really close to being profitable per car made, it sounds like, and Lucid obviously is not quite there yet, but it doesn't happen overnight. Tesla showed that it takes about 7-8 years of really making production and leaning into bringing more stuff in-house and not having 225 different manufacturers be a part of your assembly line. That'll be interesting. I think Volkswagen Group as a whole would not be a fan of this news and may incentivize them to actually start producing more cars here in the United States. As we all know, the Robo-Taxi event was last Thursday. I believe it was 10/10. I fortunately was able to get a chance to get an invite to go to that. There was a lot of cool creators there, whether it was Sawyer or Ryan, and I think everyone had a really, really good time. The one thing I noticed was that the robots just weren't quite there yet. You could tell they were human assisted. Their movements were definitely probably a parallel of someone controlling the robot, just of how robotic they were. You did get a drink served, which is pretty cool. We'll probably attach that video. You can show you guys have probably seen it on Twitter. What stands out to you is how hard they're gripping the things. So we went for a fist bump against one of the robots, and instantly one of the employees like, hey, you can't touch it yet, all that stuff. And I was thinking, it's not that they're actually concerned about the robot getting hurt, but when I grabbed the drink out of the robot's hand, there's nothing I could do to take that drink out of its hand. And if it would hypothetically push too far forward, whatever, it could break a wrist. You could do a lot of things. So I get why there's very little human interaction in terms of touch. So I think the controls and when it goes to grip, it's just so exponentially more powerful than humans are used to from a human interaction. Until they can have that throttle down a little bit and make it more fluid and make up a softer touch, it's gonna be really hard for those robots to interact with people. Obviously in the back end, I don't think it was an AI person responding. It was someone just answering questions. But in concept, it was a super, super cool event. What I felt very real and not a Hollywood event was the actual robo-taxis themselves. The robo-taxis, we did a ride from one of the, I think it was Westworld to the New York location, Warner Brothers. That you could feel. So there's a difference between FSD and my Model Y when I'm driving to work. And you can feel the difference, and you're driving to understand. You can see it make some mistakes, and you can make it to work, right? It's another thing to be in a car without any pedals, without any steering wheel, and the door shut on the click of a button. That will be the future, right? I think Elon talked about it. He said they want to partner with companies, management companies, to run these cars, help them fleet, help organize the operations at scale, use software to help dictate where the car should be, hopefully have charging hubs across these Well, for example, Phoenix, across the valley, it's 85 miles wide, right? Like, where do these cars store overnight? How do they be as automated as possible, right? And that you could instantly see the real world use case within the next year and a half. You don't see that with the robo-taxis. You don't really see that with the robo-bus, which I do think will have really interesting impacts on society once you get to those being live in cities like New York or LA, where traffic's very, very poor. I could imagine a line of 40 of those just following each other and people are getting in as if it's a bus, but extremely effective on a path line, maybe predetermined at first, but can get around town very, very fast. So you don't have to worry about train stations, and you don't have to build out train station paths. You know, building out the actual infrastructure for the trains, it's very, very expensive. All you have to do is make a road designated for these, and these things can move pretty efficiently. So I think that's a really, really cool feature that will probably be second in line, and my guess is the Robo-Taxi is last. With the Robo-Taxi, I think he said that they will be on sale in 2026, potentially the last part of 2026, and full self-driving will be live this coming year in Texas and California. That will not indicate that you can have those cars drive autonomously yet. I think it will go Robo-Taxi first, then Tesla Model Ys in the future will be able to interact in that way. But that is gonna come a lot faster than people think. Elon even jokes about over-promising, under-delivering in terms of timelines. But once the products have been fully phased in, I do think we're gonna see something we haven't seen probably since the iPhone in terms of how our daily lives change with mobility. It becomes a web effect, right? So maybe it isn't more efficient to fly to LA. Maybe it actually is more efficient to get in a robo-taxi and just take a nap and work and get there because of the transition of the airport, of waiting in line and all the extra stuff. And it might even be cheaper to just jump in a robo-taxi and be there overnight and you can fall asleep in the car, right? Versus airplanes have time schedules, there's limitations how people can get on the planes, and these mobility systems won't be limited by geography, right? You will be able to go from, hypothetically, Phoenix to LA, Phoenix to Las Vegas. You know, there might be distance where you have to get onto another one or it has to charge, right? But that is gonna be a really efficient way for people to travel, especially on the East Coast where it's much more dense. And maybe the last use case might be in the Midwest or, you know, in Montana where stuff's more spread out, just like the adoption was slower there. But that will be a really, really, really interesting use case for our kids and our grandkids to see how much easier it is to get across the United States, much like how Europe has the train system. If we have the robo-taxi system in effect where it's that easy to go and transport, it'll be the #1 use case for long-term travel. That's it for the latest EV news today. We're going through and hopefully making more updates like this here in the near future. We'll be announcing our new Turo course that we're working with the Heart Rental guys. I don't think I view myself as a person who will be, what do they call them, gurus, right? I don't view myself as that, but I've had enough people now approach us asking, how do you do this? I get calls, how do you handle these claims? How would you buy these Teslas, right? So I think I'm just gonna package that all up super simple. I don't think it's gonna be an incredibly high price point. We're gonna figure out what our time relevancy is and hopefully help people step that direction on Turo. And we will get into some more Turo news here in the future, figure out how we handle their changes, you know, what's appropriate from Turo, what is not, what's the best way to handle when you're stuck on a marketplace where you feel like you have no control. All that stuff in the future will be a really, really big thing that we're gonna focus on and hopefully create some cohesion in the network, and we'll be going from there. So I appreciate it. Like and subscribe.